you for joining us today on Earthfile. I am Ayola Kasim. According to a new report from the United Nations Environment Programme and the INTERPOL, global environmental crime worth up to $213 billion each year is helping to finance criminal, militia, and terrorist groups and threatening the security and sustainable development of many nations. In total, militia and terrorist groups in and around African nations with ongoing conflict may earn up to $289 million annually from their involvement in and tasking of the illegal or unregulated charcoal trade.
Matthew Muti is a small-scale charcoal trader in Kibwezi, a dry, arid area in Kenya's coastal area. Matthew began cutting down trees and burning them for charcoal 5 years ago as a means to earn a living. With each haul, he makes about 20 sacks, which he sells for $6 each. Matthew knows illegal logging is harmful to the environment, but he says he is poor and has no choice if he is to support his family. Charcoal, worth about $1.7 million, is shipped out of Kenya illegally every month. In Kenya, forest cover has diminished from 10% to 6.7% since the 1950s. The government has implemented programs to try and curb further depletion of forests. One of these is an initiative that works with communities in Kibwezi. They encourage charcoal traders like Matthew to create nurseries and plant new trees. They help traders sell their seedlings to make
The charcoal burning had been very serious, especially in these ranches and in private land. And from the statistics we have, we were having over 5,000 bugs daily within these particular areas. But the project has really assisted to reduce that to around 500, 2,000 bugs per day.
Here in Nigeria, there is a high demand for charcoal among European countries because of its good quality. Charcoal from Nigeria is easy to light and can burn for a long time. The charcoal industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry and a money spinner for interested investors. The United Kingdom alone consumes more than 60,000 metric tons of charcoal annually, out of which about 70% comes from tropical Africa.
The impact of that illegal charcoal trade alongside the tolerated, or let's say the accepted charcoal trade, you're talking about a major onslaught on Africa's biofuel resources. And that is also a worrying trend, why we look at this as an issue of environmental crime, but also a threat to forests, to vegetation across the continent, and why the issue then links also into an element that we're trying to highlight here, which is if we can give people access to other forms of energy, then we also, first of all, begin to address the enormous need that exists there, and it will make it easier to isolate the illegal trade, because it will be more visible. At the moment it hides literally on top of the truck tires where 5 bags are transported along, and everybody thinks it's just 2 or 3 or 4 bags. It's thousands. It's probably hundreds of thousands if you add up the numbers.
But the sale of illegal charcoal is also funding militia and terrorist groups in the region. In Somalia, Islamist group Al-Shabaab makes over $50 million from the trade.
If you drive up and down the road from Nairobi to Mombasa, you see innocent local people selling bags of charcoal. So, you know, this is the poor man's revenue. And how could this be financing international conflicts or local civil strife? I think we, in part, have learned through the example of what was found in the context of Somalia, that actually, not surprisingly, in the context of civil strife and conflict, what people will do is use anything that they can find locally in order to finance the purchase of weapons, payment of fighters. And what people have discovered as a result of an existing tradition, an innocent tradition of just providing people with access to fuel, is that there is a major economy in charcoal. And what we underestimated, I think, because we never really looked at it, is that once you start adding up the flows in charcoal and the quantities, you're talking about a lot of money for a lot of weapons, for a lot of people to be paid to continue fighting. This charcoal trade is one that interesting enough, is no longer just a phenomenon that is local, but it's actually moved across borders, and that's why it's beginning to be registered more clearly. And we're able to come up with more accurate estimates.
In terms of charcoal, as has been reported by the group of experts to the UN Security Council, charcoal is the primary finance also for Al-Shabaab and potentially also militia groups in the Trans-Sahara region.
Illegal logging and forest crime has an estimated worth of $30 to $100 billion annually, or 10 to 30% of the total global timber trade. An estimated 50 to 90% of the wood in some individual tropical countries is suspected to come from illegal sources or has been logged illegally. For pulp and paper production, network of shell companies and plantations are used to funnel illegal timber through plantations or to ship wood and pulp via legal plantations. These methods effectively bypass many current customs effects to restrict the import of illegal tropical wood to the United States and to the European Union.
50 to 90% of the logging in several developing countries is likely and deemed to be illegal. And we believe that the sheer scale of illegal logging is equivalent to 10 to 30% of the global trade, or between 30 and $100 billion annually. This covers different areas. With forest crime, it includes both the illegal trade in endangered and very rare species such as rosewood and sandalwood, like from East Africa, and mahogany from many different parts of the world. It also includes what most people consider with illegal logging, timber, but more importantly, it also includes elements of organized crime involved in the pulp and paper industry. The common denominator for these is that they involved advanced laundering methods, harvesting illegal wood, mixing it with legal wood, and we're talking in the scales of millions of truckloads annually. In terms of paper and pulp, most of the illegal imports of tropical wood to the EU and the US comes in the form of exactly this, paper and pulp. 62 to 86% are believed to originate through paper and pulp. The fourth and rapidly growing form of forest crime involved the unregulated and partly illicit trade in charcoal. This is also causing major loss of revenues to governments. In Africa alone, we believe that governments are losing revenues for at least $1.9 billion a year. Secondly, we also believe that due to the involvement of organized crime in the entire charcoal trade, we believe that people organized in this are probably making even more than the government would from revenues in the scale of $2 to $9 billion a year. This is equivalent up to 3 times the value of the drug trade in Africa.
Based on data from Eurostat, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, and the International Tropical Timber Organization, the EU and the United States annually import approximately 33.5 million tons of tropical wood in all its forms. It is estimated that 62 to 86% of all suspected illegal tropical wood entering the EU and the US arrives in the form of paper, pulp, or wood chips.
Our objective is not to stop nations and communities trading in natural resources with one another, but rather to stop the illegal economy from undermining the legal trade. That's why certification, national control and monitoring systems are so crucial in order to be able to inform consumers. We need wood, we need timber, we need paper products. What we don't want is that 60 to 70%, I think the report says, of all illegally imported timber into Europe or the United States is actually not recognized as such because it is in the form of paper, not the log or the piece of furniture that you buy, or in the form of wood chips.
In Africa, 90% of wood consumed is used for wood fuel and charcoal, with an official charcoal production of 30.6 million tons in 2012, worth approximately 9.2 to 24.5 billion annually. The unregulated charcoal trade alone involves an annual revenue loss of at least $1.9 billion to African countries.
The charcoal trade, often underestimated by people, is an integral part not only of a degradation of natural resources happening across the world, but also very much here in Africa. It is contributing to what is referred to as threat finance. And we all know that these are not small amounts of money, and in fact sustain conflict, enable people to buy arms, and ultimately to put civil strife and conflict not simply as a localized phenomenon, but as part of a transnational network that operates across the globe.
Whereas when we speak about charcoal, we are talking as threat finance between 111 and $289 million. This number is likely to triple in the coming decades. And we believe that the scale of logging in Africa alone would be equivalent in a few decades from now to up to twice the amount that's being logged in the Amazon just to sustain the illegal charcoal trade.
Criminal syndicates and rebel groups are also increasingly involved in the illegal hunting and wildlife trade. In Kenya, as in the rest of the continent, poaching has risen in recent years. Well-armed militia gangs have killed elephants for tusks and rhinos for horns that are often shipped to Asia for use in ornaments and medicines. The Kenyan